Welcome back to Night Mind, friends. I do hope you've been adjusting well to the colder weather. It's precisely this time of year that I remember a lot of captivating online horror moments have unfolded, and I feel a bit disappointed when we go through a year without a resurgence of that particular thrill. It's a great ride, but I never feel completely satisfied after October. Thankfully, I received a tip-off on something that scratches that itch. A bit nostalgic, a bit stunning, and the right amount of horrifying. Much in the vein of Pets Cop and Catastrophe Crow, it also counts as a unique new approach in the analog horror subgenre for its methodology, combining the VHS recording format with another new millennium horror scenario you're all acquainted with. On October 5th, 2022, a video was posted to the YouTube account Alluvium by its owner. As the man is from Argentina, the video is in Spanish, but there are captions relaying the story. Alluvium has tried all morning to put his video into words, no matter what language it's in. But as he puts it, it is what it is. 2 years ago, he got a bit off track walking around in the park, ending up in a section of the forest that was considered dead. In one of those sections, there's a forest entrance, and inside he found a statuette. This statuette, to be precise, seen in the extra image he provided through a link in the description. Beneath it was a patch of recently disturbed earth, with a small red string sticking out. He tried to pull it out of curiosity, but it was stuck, clearly buried much deeper than the surface. A week later, he came back with a shovel and unearthed a metal lunchbox wrapped in string. When it opened, it was full of styrofoam, stuffed on all sides to protect its contents, a VHS tape. Alluvium took it home, and because he had his father's VCR, he decided to give it a watch. According to the captions, the vast majority of clips that came after this had way too much skipping audio, and I decided to write this last part because it was going to be a lot of subtitles anyway. When I watched the video, I found recordings of an apparently normal video game. I watched for some minutes and I found nothing too weird. I advanced the tape to various parts, wasn't. I had no idea that the game was unknown, mainly because I'm not that much into games to begin with. I felt a little disappointed, and I put the tape next to the VCR, and there it remained until recently. The topic came up in a conversation with a friend. He asked me if he could see it, and he was the one that looked for information and discovered that the game was unknown. So I asked him to help me digitize it, because frankly, I'm not the brightest one when it comes to that. I will continue to upload until I complete the entire tape, but I have to review it properly, almost frame by frame, to make sure I'm not uploading something potentially illegal for obvious reasons. You can find the link to the video in the description. The tape is there, just as promised, in the original Spanish seen within the tape, and with an upload that has English captioning. As with everything we examine in the Night Mind office, I encourage you to watch the original content first, especially in cases like this. The video is only 20 minutes 57 seconds, and you won't get the impact from it through an examination lens here that you will from a dedicated viewing. And naturally, this is as much about paying proper respect and viewership to the original creator as it is ensuring your experience is appropriately horrifying. I've put the link in the description to the English captioned upload of Valle Verde, and there's an info card occurring on this video now you can select for the same purpose. When you're done viewing, return to me here, and I can explain the hidden components, oddities, and necessary translations within. Oh, and a warning for those who require it. As far as horror video game stories go, this one actually does have some decent scares. Go ahead and clutch a pillow or turn on a light if you need a bit of bravery. Or just hang out with me here, and I'll lead you through. All set? Excellent. And by the way, if you didn't get yourself a snack or a hot drink during that pause, this is your last call to do so. Now, first things first, following the classic PlayStation startup sequence, the tape's info screen. This was recorded on February 14th, 1997, Valentine's Day. Made in Japan, the unreleased game was under investigation by two men, Robert Saturn and Pablo L. Gutierrez, reporting on malfunctioning AI, corrupted learning data, and issues regarding product specialized hardware, the TH brain, which is referenced several times in the game. While peripheral devices aren't uncommon now, they were relatively rare and expensive items in the early stages of the PlayStation era, and this definitely indicates a special peripheral device for the PS1 to go along with Valle Verde. This game also has its own AI system and learning data, which could mean exactly what you think on first glance, or might be time-appropriate definitions of AI and learning data for game developers, though it's doubtful considering what happens later. The subject reads Green Valley, which is just the name of the game. The product was developed by the Japanese company Onyxware, represented with a red O over a blue X, which seems to correlate to the color of the strings around the middle lunchbox. The text beneath it reads, "Your heart is in our hands," a heavy motto for a company. Shizuoka Institute of Science and Technology is real. That's a science and tech university in Japan. 4 languages are presented for the game, and Spanish is chosen. The intro cutscene begins and is skipped by the player recorded, with the title screen blazed through in similar fashion. We're told the player is connecting and should not unplug the TH-Brain device, restart or turn off the console. So, from the get-go, Valle Verde, Green Valley, absolutely requires the peripheral interface. How is it meant to interface with a user? That's a question we'll need to keep in mind, but TH-Brain indicates that this may be some experimental mental interface technology. The beginning visuals have been highly impressive and reminiscent of turn-of-the-century games, but nothing in the realm of horror video game storytelling has given us an animated scene as impressive, faithful, and downright professional as the beginning to Green Valley. This is breathtaking work. The animation, the character models, the menus, even the music is spot on. Watching this, it is genuinely hard to believe it wasn't real at some points. And right after a character is established, the player is treated to even more animation that just makes you believe it. It truly makes you believe it if you didn't know any better. The test player arrives at Debug Shima, Debug Island, and is told to meet Foxo in town. And just listen to the sounds as the player does this. Pay close attention to the first character to notice them here too. Did you hear that? The robot character actually made robotic sounds as it turned its head. That is such a small detail, but it's precisely the kind you would find in a professional product like this, and it really adds to the authenticity. Foxo, the apparent mayor, greets the test character, giving them credentials and explaining his armband of leadership. There's one for every tree of knowledge. He then takes the player on a brief tour, beginning with where they'll be staying, a rundown shop that the owner abandoned a while ago. Next, it's time to meet the locals. Right, so, we've seen enough video game horror to know almost immediately what's taking place here. These are previous players. They're most likely test players, actual children who were introduced to the game and are now, unlike Matthias, nowhere to be seen. Ghosts, captured souls, or a roster of victims of some paranormal force. Go ahead and place your bets now. And while it is unnerving, it's also a rather quick development, isn't it? Just 4.5 minutes into an almost 21-minute video, we're receiving heavy doses of distortion. Whatever's going on here, it's not very patient. Heavy glitching takes us back to the town center, with Foxo's big golden statue in the middle. He talks about it a bit and says the smiling one has given him absolute authority over this area. 5 minutes in, and we have a name of something in charge that sounds less than friendly. Foxo stops speaking and read for a moment to describe the characters around town. Ito at the museum, Dr. Nito in his subterranean lab, and Isaac, his boxer robot. Foxo gives the player some money, then his box turns red again with a gear icon, telling you to remember that next election season. A very clear sign of corruption. The player is released to go explore, and immediately after turning his back on the mayor, he approaches and causes a new cutscene, plunging him into debt as the gear icon flashes below. Whether it's Tom Nook, a fox, or somebody else, you really can't ever trust the town leader, can you? We're presented with an anomaly report of spontaneous level generation on this day, leading the player into a sudden clearing in a forest filled with cake. The tester opens the map, acknowledging silently that they're confused, and heads back out. The path forward has no indication of woods ahead. This level jump is definitely spontaneous. The sounds of food and drink fill this place, and the player moves forward into the next zone, filled with statues with judgmental eyes. He doesn't linger here, taking in just a few glances before moving on to a zone filled with riches. Piles of gold, expensive art, and the sounds of a cash register. He needs to pick up a pile in order to clear the path ahead, and in the inventory, its description reads, "Stash of coins. You took it from the mayor's office, didn't you?" All of these clearings are rather mysterious, but the next is a special increase in the intensity. Did you manage to catch what that last item following the player character was? It's easy enough to know what everything else is. The blood, the babies covered in blood. But this? On close inspection, this is a pair of forceps held by a hand wrapped in a surgical glove, attempting to attack the player. We've seen cake, we've seen staring eyes, we've seen wealth, and here we see a clearing presenting a subject with the same letters as the word absorption, minus the S and P. The next clearing has a load of records, and a song is playing about a man telling another off for trying to rest while he works. The player, noticeably, also slows down to a crawl while trying to leave. The next clearing is very red. A statue with a large, angry eye overlooks many smaller statues cowering away. The audio playing is a quote from J. Robert Oppenheimer, the scientific director of the atomic bomb, describing the scene around him while witnessing the first successful detonation. The following clearing is cast in darkness, a fleshy, pulpier red ground with statues looking at themselves in mirrors. And through this area, the player finds what looks like the entrance to holy ground. 10 angel statues placed in a circle of worship before a pair of large gates. Beyond these gates, a church is found, with a massive cross statue in front of it. The player turns around, and the scene jumps to an account of another anomaly. Patient 2 unable to move, 2-15-97. So the test player is picking up the following day. Inside a cafe, a scripted interaction takes place, and the player pushes through in order to meet a character at the back, Matthias. "Are you with the agents?" he asks. "Can you hear me? Where is Chloe? What's happening?" A red text window appears, and inside it reads, "Can you see me? Can you see the bar?" "Yes," Matthias answers. "I can't move." It's easy to understand from this exchange that the red window is the test player writing. "Do you see someone else?" he asks. "Do you know where the others are?" Matthias doesn't answer this, instead saying, "What happened? I want to speak to my mom. I want to speak with Mr. Kunimuchi." "He is no longer with us," the test player says. Matthias nearly cuts him off. "I don't want to play anymore. Please get me out." The game then crashes, and a black screen persists until showing the next anomaly 2 days later, random appearance of data. But let's review what happened for a moment. We'll get to the odd series of forest clearings after the next segment, as it's actually a form of continuation. The test player is definitely one of the investigators assigned to the game, and Matthias is a child stuck inside the game, as a consciousness and as a player character. The investigator wants to know what happened to the others, those almost certainly being the other children whose homes were shown by Foxo. Matthias specifically asks about Chloe, the girl from France, who we know has disappeared along with the others. The investigator may be asking if Matthias sees anyone else because the disappearance of the kids inside the game is what provoked them to dive in. Someone leading the project in some way, Mr. Kunimochi, is no longer with them. That's either let go by the company or let go by the physical plane. So we have 4 missing kids, 1 stuck inside the game, and a possibly dead or fired project lead who helped Matthias adjust to the game. The TH Brain device is very, very likely to be a cranial interface, developed well before and above any VR technology we have today. Back to that third anomaly, the player character now enters the church seen previously. The random appearance of data cited for this is most likely the audio that plays in the scene, a recitation of an old poem, Lovely Lady Dressed in Blue, about the relationship between the Virgin Mary and Jesus. It's indicated this is being performed by the priest at the head of the church. Talking to him, he gives you a joke about his watch. He shouldn't have taught it the secrets of Joseph of Cupertino, a famous levitating priest who also received visions, because now, time flies. So, the church at the end of the sequence of clearings, it did hold what seemed like a legitimate presence and wasn't warped, so much as it was added to. What sense are we to make of the clearings that came before it then? They actually seem to correlate to one of the most commonly used themes in works judging the shortcomings of man, especially in a Christianity lens, the 7 deadly sins. There are 7 clearings and 7 sins. The cake room is gluttony. The statues with staring eyes means envy. The gold and art are greed. The baby room is lust, although it's an extremely morbid way to show that one. The records room with the song about a lazy man stands for sloth. The red room with the angry-eyed statue discussing dropping bombs is wrath. And the final room with mirrors is pride, also known on occasion as vanity. There's also a visitor here, seen during one frame of the video in the sloth room. Is this the smiling one? Probably. Could be a henchman or other figure, but we'll keep it in mind. In the next anomaly, February 18th, there's evidence of object generation and change. This is a lighter one. The Foxo statue changes position while Foxo himself has his back turned, suggesting a far more animalistic nature. The following day gives an anomaly of object generation during a plane flying delivery minigame, spawning a weird version of the Statue of Liberty. The tape quickly picks up on the next anomaly from February 21st, 1997, of spontaneous level generation. The town residents are walking single file into an alleyway, which seems to require a frame-perfect squeeze by the player to access. Ahead lies a tree, and in front of it, a portal through an arch composed of 2 rulers. One says Égalité, the other Fraternity, and on the ground is the word Liberty. This is the motto of France: equality, brotherhood, and liberty. The tester finds himself in a white void with giant statues in the mist, and one of them moves in the distance. This appears to be a wasteland, and on completing a full scan of the area, the player is faced with a circle of 6 walls. In the center lies a fallen lamb. The player stands next to it, glowing white, and then... jump scare. Turn on the console on March 22nd, 1997, a month after the date this is occurring, basically. Why would this be a request? As far as looking at the angle of the religious themes present in the game, March 30th, 1997 was Easter Sunday. That puts the 22nd within the realm of Holy Week, but still a day out of reach. March 23rd, 1997 was Palm Sunday, the start of Holy Week, the day Jesus entered Jerusalem and was celebrated by the people. It could be another religious element we're witnessing, but we'll need to see the evidence of what happened in-game on that day. As for this entire sequence, the portal bore the motto of France. The only nod we have to France is Chloe, the little girl Matthias was looking for. Presumably the last to disappear, she was the last person on Matthias's mind. It's easy to see a little girl like a fallen lamb, encircled by whatever wolves are inside this place. I'm not entirely sold on the fullness of this interpretation though. We might need to make more connections. Now, the anomaly from February 22nd, stating to read the full report. This one, I'm sure doesn't actually need a lot of explaining. This is one of the most famous religious stories of all time. The red box with the gear appears asking the test player if he's hungry. It's a mysterious voice that directs him to a tree, where several fruits lay on the ground, and tempts him to eat. This is as transparent as can be. It's the myth of the fall of man, when the devil, as a serpent, encouraged Eve to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This goes exactly the way you expect it to go. What have you done? Look at you. You have ruined yourself. Look at what you've done, imbecile. Why are you just standing there? Take as many fruits as you can. Quick, time is running out. You'll know you'll die, right? If you are up to the neck, why don't you keep going down? Do you have something else than the consolation of this earth? Take what you can. What are you doing there losing time? You are already stained, aren't you? Go on, what difference does it make? Your destiny is sealed. All these lines in one run from the voice, now known as the accuser, followed by an ugly face in darkness. It's very transparently about the fall of man and the formation of original sin. And for those of you wondering how this setup happened in the game without an apple, that's because an apple is a modern invention of the fruit of the tree of good and evil. The actual fruit in question was never specified in the original book of Genesis. For all you know, that specific fruit only ever grew in the Garden of Eden, and you'll never taste or see a descendant of it on this earth. Following this fall of man in Green Valley, hey, perhaps another allusion to the Garden of Eden, Green Valley, the player walks out into the circle of angel statues. When they turn around, the gate to the church is closed and guarded by what looks like a biblically accurate angel. The player approaches and... yeah, that would scar some kids for life if they play this game, wouldn't it? The player arrives in what seems like a hellscape, with a statue nearby resembling a goat with long pointed horns. The character Ito, the museum keeper, is here. His speech is presented in red with the gear icon, which we can by now presume to be the influence of the force at work within the game. Strangely, there's some speech given that isn't translated, and the name indicated at the start changes from calm to Spanish for the Smile. In full it reads, "The Smile asked me to collect 10 faces for this carnival." He's then translated for, "Could you help me?" A warning box appears, indicating that auto-generated tasks can present problems and destabilize the system. If you have problems completing an auto-generated task, reboot the system and disable it through the TH Brain menu. Notice also the large red spinning gear icon behind the warning box. Usually, the gear is associated in programs with settings or system options. It's fair to say the system of Green Valley itself has been poisoned by the Smiling One, who seems to be regarded as the devil. This entire warning might also be a trap if you consider the language. Reboot the system and disable it through the TH Brain menu. That means you absolutely must be interfacing through the device that is most likely to cause you problems while playing this game, controlled by a devil, in order to disable it. Not an easy situation. The player accepts the task to go skin 10 people's faces for a carnival and heads out. When the environment changes, we understand more clearly what's happening. This hellscape is not another environment. It's a corruptive texture that's reskinning the existing island. Even in shadow, you can see the homes of the previously captured players in their neighborhood, leading up to Matthias's home, with the boxer robot cowering behind a tree. Studying that first hellscape area again, we can even recognize it for what it is, the town center. The statue of Foxo is the goat statue with horns. It's been replaced on its pedestal. The shapes of the buildings we've already seen are here. Their textures are just entirely corrupted. So, why is it that Matthias's house remains unscathed and the boxer robot? The player enters to the sound of an old Spanish record, with a man singing about the hour of death nearing. The player investigates some documents on a desk, a series of strange drawings. The name is a lead we can follow, and it turns up quite the result. Benjamin Solari Paravicini. We've seen evidence of his work in the game already. Here. This model is his take on the Statue of Liberty, and it comes from a vision of his about the events of September 11th. Paravicini was known as Argentina's Nostradamus and claimed that when he was a child, he communicated with fairies, angels, and other spirits. His contacts allowed him to find lost objects and even lost people. He also apparently predicted World War I in the year it was going to happen. Throughout his adult life, he made over 1,000 psychographies, psychic drawings meant to portray things to come. Interpretation of his work has led people to believe he predicted TV, satellites, and yes, September 11th. Paravicini has interesting ties to a previously mentioned figure in Green Valley, Joseph of Cupertino, who received ecstatic visions from God. Paravicini claimed that he often destroyed his drawings in fear of violation of his Catholic upbringing, and it seems he only stopped doing so when he made contact with one of his guardian angels, a deceased religious artist. Paravicini also claimed to hear voices during the crafting of his psychographies, and later in life, confided in a friend that he had once been abducted by aliens. Take that last note as you will. In Matthias's house, there's a cross over a door to the right. Inside is a bedroom with another cross and several religious paintings on the wall, including a famous painting of Jesus, Divine Mercy. And just like that, the first segment of the video ends. In the description, Alluvium writes, "I will upload the rest once I properly review it. It's like an hour long." Almost 21 minutes out of an hour-long tape. We're likely to receive 2 or 3 more parts then, which is exciting. As for what's left to consider of the material we have covered, it's very clear why Matthias's house has not been disturbed. It's been blessed by his faith. Matthias himself may be in a locked position in the game because he has some protection in this way. The robot left quaking is spared for obvious reason too. It's not human, so it can't be corrupted by the devil present within the game. Original sin does not affect a robot. This sequence is also easy to interpret. Once tainted by the theft of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, the player was kicked out of heaven, evidenced by being placed beyond the gate, and an angel was put out front to guard it. This is literally what happens in the book of Genesis. He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he placed the cherubim, and a sword flaming and turning to guard the way to the tree of life. So, what happened to the player who, now tainted, dared approach the cherubim? Agony. Sheer, writhing agony, followed by waking up in a corrupted world. The religious themes here extend beyond the game, by the way. The statuette that was found at the site of the buried tape is a depiction of the Virgin Mary. It almost seemed placed there in order to protect what the contents were. So, in summation, what we have here is actually really easy to put into words, which is kind of a first for a horror game story. It's an unreleased experimental video game from the PlayStation era, created by a Japanese company in partnership with Spanish employees, utilizing a peripheral interface called the TH-Brain that almost definitely is a cranial device. There's a devil inside the game going by the name The Smiling One, corrupting everything and capturing the consciousnesses of the children playtesters, except for Matthias, who appears to be a good little Catholic boy, so he is surviving. And he might also have a preoccupation with psychics doing the work of God, or God is at work within the game to combat the devil that's corrupted it, maybe? Perhaps the TH-Brain's knack for overdoing it on imprinting consciousness brought in Matthias's fear of the devil when he was added to the game world, creating a reflective scenario that's now spun out of control. It remains to be seen exactly how this whole layout came to be, but it's not out of the question for the game to have been developed purposely as a religious product. A Spanish company could have easily written the concept, found a company in Japan to build it, and bankrolled the whole thing. There have been purely religious games crafted and targeted to kids on consoles in the early days, often for parental fears of video games potentially corrupting their children. We know what the game is, we know the situation, and we understand a good deal of the mysteries at play. What we don't know is how or why it's happening. The Paravicini angle too is pretty strange, especially packaged with Joseph of Cupertino. What is it about visions this game is pressing the player over? And another mystery, March 22nd, 1997. I imagine that in a future upload, we'll see what that's about, but it's a very specific date, isn't it? I suppose the only thing for it now is to sit and wait it out. This is a different project for sure. When the setup indicated a VHS tape held footage of a game, I was a little hesitant, because it just seemed a bit too odd of a premise to buy into, almost forced. Yet the way the story actually goes, this is much more plausible, being a recording of playtesting. The difficulty in jumping the hurdle of suspension of disbelief is in the discovery of the tape. Why would this just be buried in a park? Obviously, it was meant for discovery, but I'm hoping the logic behind this will eventually be laid out as better than being just because it's spooky. I have some faith that it will though, because the easy conclusion to draw from these circumstances is that someone on the outside needed to see what happened in this game eventually, and the competency in the creation of this project is very clear. That doesn't necessarily translate into strength of writing, but seriously, this is superior graphics and animation work. Really superior. It's actually too good for being the classic PlayStation era, I'd say. I would try to work in that this was being developed for PS2, because it's just such robust work. None of the other old, obscure game horror stories we've seen genuinely presented as games have looked this convincing and well-crafted. And again, that opening animation, the dedication to little sounds and character model details. I am thoroughly impressed by this work. I will never stop singing the praises of the graphics on this one. Especially that animation. That is above and beyond the Call of Duty. Excellent work to whoever put that together. Now, besides the concern behind the discovery of the tape, I've only got 2 issues that I want to bring up. The scares within this project are actually effective, even if they are jump scares. Jump scares need a build-up to be justified, and they need to be a legitimate threat, so both of the hard jump scares are earned. Good on those points. The speed at which we got into the scary stuff though, and how sudden it was, I am not a fan of. The build-up simply didn't exist for the neighborhood tour, and if it had been handled more softly and in an eerie manner that let you know something was wrong, then gave us Matthias' sequence, it would have eased us into the rising terror. That's how to prime your audience right for getting the scares going. You need to work them up before you whip out the loud noises and distortions. Priming, priming, priming. Priming is your path to good scares. My other issue is in line with the speed at which the scares begin. A lot of the writing here is happening a bit too fast and a little too clearly. For the first installment of a project, I was able to discern what's going on far too quickly. That's never a call for a creator to purposely become obscure, and I advise no one to do that, but the transparency of what's occurring here made it a rather open and shut case outside of what we absolutely need more episodes for. We have reasons to hang on, besides pure curiosity, and that is good. Religious themes are usually very, very easy to catch though. These are some of the most overtold and easily applied tales in the Western world, and very, very quickly identified in any form of fiction. Stretching them out makes it easier to work with. The Catholicism angle was laid on pretty thickly in just part 1 though. Green Valley is still a fantastic creation, and I'm certainly going to be hanging on for the rest of the hour that's on the tape. The creator is clearly skilled, and we have plenty of time to see them surprise us. And what exactly March 22nd, 1997 is about. And in case you're wondering on my behalf, yes, this one did indeed hit that sweet November craving for something horrifying and mysterious online, and I'm quite thankful for it. Be sure to subscribe to Illuvium so you can catch the next uploads, as I have. There's no telling when the next part will appear, but I'm eagerly awaiting its release. Thanks to Illuvium for making Baie Verde, and anyone who assisted in its creation. Thanks to all of you for watching, and thanks to my supporters on Patreon, who willingly plug their consciousness into this demon's world. If you'd like to support Nightmind, you can do so for as little as just $2 a month, which gets your name in the credits of all major videos and allows you into the Patreon community with our Discord. This also supports the Nightmind Index for new and emerging on-fiction projects. And if you can't do Patreon, you might have noticed the new thanks button below my videos. You can donate a personal thanks to me directly this way, and your comment will show up with a special tag. So, if you enjoy what I do or particularly enjoy this episode and want to say thanks that way, you can do so. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for joining me in the dark again this evening. Once more, I'm Nick Nocturne, and I'll be seeing you again real soon. Beware of anomalies as you're going about town, and until next time, sleep tight.
Deep in the wilderness of North Berkshire County, Massachusetts, lies the state's tallest peak, known as Mount Greylock. In an analog horror by the same name, many disturbing things have been happening in the area surrounding the mountain. A shady government conspiracy, an ancient illness set loose, bodies falling from the sky, home invasions, and more await you in the 10 tapes that Greylock has to offer thus far. Today, I'm gonna go through every one of them and try to piece together exactly what's going on. If you've been on the channel before, welcome back. If not, hello, my name is Minaxa, and today we're gonna be taking a deep dive into the mystery of Greylock. But before we get to the rest of the video, I have to ask you a question. Are you gonna have trouble sleeping tonight after watching me cover this scary analog horror series? Well, then you'd probably like today's sponsor, Manta Sleep. Manta Sleep is a company that crafts specialized sleep masks to help you sleep or nap better and for longer. They have cooling masks, steam masks, weighted masks, and even a sound mask if you like to listen to things to help you fall asleep. The one they sent me was the sound mask, and I found that it definitely beats falling asleep with earbuds in, that's for sure. The headphones are high quality and impossible to feel, the material is perforated so it doesn't feel too stifling, and the battery life is 20 hours at 100%. I would genuinely recommend trying these out if you like to listen to ambient sound or ASMR to fall asleep. With all that being said, if you visit their website using the link below or use my code minaxa, you can get 10% off your order. Head on down to mantasleep.com and start sleeping better tonight.
The best way to start investing is with XTB, because there money works for you as active or passive investments with courses, video tutorials, and market analysis.
XTB, where your money works.
Be careful, investing involves the risk of losing.
The first tape in the series is called Back Online. It begins with a computer system coming back online after an emergency shutdown, which then turns on the camera system, which provides our visuals for the episode. It seems like this place may have been abandoned for a while. The person who restarted the computer system attempts to log in, but their credentials are denied. Afterwards, they manage to somehow override the system and log in with administrative privileges.
Administrator privileges granted. Welcome back, unknown user ID. What would you like to do?
During all this, the cameras are attempting to switch to the feed in the morgue. For some reason, this place is a morgue, but an error prevents this from happening. From there, this individual attempts to extract information that was left behind on this computer system. What that information is exactly, we don't really know.
Data extraction, 80% complete. Data extraction complete. All data extracted to error, no.
This introduction to the series is very short and very vague, as will be most things in this series. The crucial bits of information that should be taken from it are 1. There is someone with the ability to bypass the computer system login that has a reason to be extracting information from their computer systems. And 2, these computer systems seem to belong to an organization named Semiodyne USA. With that information mentally noted, we can move on to tape 2, To the Mountain. The second tape opens with dashcam footage. Presumably based on the title, we can probably say that they're driving along a road on or near Mount Greylock. The person driving has the radio tuned into a sermon, which may seem unrelated now, but in hindsight will be very important thematically.
He said, quote, "Our adversary, the devil, goes about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. We are not to enter the thicket in search of the lion. We may pay dear."
They arrive at a gate and stop the vehicle. The footage then switches over to a camcorder. Clearly the person is looking for something, otherwise they'd have no good reason to venture alone at night into the cold wilderness on the mountain. They spot a trail of blood and decide to follow it, and at this point heavily distorted speech plays in the background, and I believe it might be a good hint as to what this person is doing out here. We cut back to the car, and the sermon
When
continues.
we will come face to face with the devil himself, whether we
Something
intended
doesn't
to
feel
or not,
quite
dear
right,
believer.
though. They're
We are
driving
drawn to
incredibly
him by our
slowly,
own hearts.
and if you listen carefully, you can
Matthew
hear the
chapter
signal
15,
being
verse
used
19, slander. There is a
despite
shadow
no apparent
is
reasoning for it. I mean, there's
deep
no
within our
turn.
hearts, within our
Then they
minds,
stop
in a
and
place
fiddle with the
most
high
people
beams.
don't even know exists within themselves. The devil is going to call to those depths, dear believer.
Until
And though
someone
you may
or something
tremble before the
knocks
beast,
very
you should
hard
make it
on the outside
easier
of the
on
vehicle.
yourself and accept what it is that he bestows upon you.
Aside from what I've already pointed out, I wanted to save most of my thoughts on this tape for the analysis at the end. It's very vague, and like I said, most of the tapes will be vague, but not quite as vague as this one. It's hard to place. Even with every bit of information from the other tapes considered, I can't say with much confidence that I have any clue as to what happened. Instead, I think we should go ahead and move on to tape 3, Orientation Protocols.
Introducing the two characters you know and love. With big mustaches, it's Luigi and the Pringles guy.
My name is Latifa Thompson Lowe. I'm 39. I've been with Juniper for 4 months, and I have lost.
This video is perhaps one of the heaviest in terms of info dump of any tape in the series. Right away, we have a lot of crucial information. For one, this is a government tape, and it's also intended for one individual's lone use, and his name is Alexander Michael Marsh. Keep that name in mind for later. Also worth noting is that this particular cassette cannot be viewed without specialized military-grade hardware, and it was manufactured by Semiodyne USA with a date of January 2nd, 1993. From there, the tape labeled TF1 for Unit 13 goes on to congratulate the user for being selected as a testing candidate for what they're doing at Unit 13. Basically, it's a specialized research group collaborating with Semiodyne USA on Project Stargate to further delve into the world of the subconscious and psychic power. In our world, Project Stargate was a real CIA initiative to investigate the potential for psychic phenomenon for military and domestic purposes. It wasn't declassified until 1995, but I assume that's only because the CIA had concluded that it was useless. Go figure. In this universe, though, they found something tangible that they can work with: thought forms. Thought forms, or tulpas in some religions and practices, are manifestations of a person's will, emotions, or other deep psychological aspect that can only be brought into existence through ridiculously consistent concentration and strong will. They were known to serve as familiars or companions, and it's worth noting that the tape makes sure to let you know that they can be formed unintentionally as well. In fact, the narration in this tape goes on to theorize that what we know as ghosts and most generic paranormal activity are actually the result of thought forms unintentionally created through the strong emotions of those mourning a recently deceased loved one. Because intentionally creating a thought form is long and arduous, requiring years upon years of work, the researchers at Unit 13 created a machine called the Thought Form Manifester. Many of these projects within Unit 13 are being led by a Dr. Bernard Hayes, another name to remember. Since thought forms created by the Thought Form Manifester come from the deepest depths of the human mind, they can take virtually any form you can think of. It can look like a person, an animal, an object, or even an abstract representation of a strong emotion. It's truly limitless, which is terrifying. The next section seems to be an attempt at reassurance, but the glitching of the tape seems to imply that whatever is being said is either not the whole truth, a misunderstood fact, or just a straight-up lie.
There's no reason to be afraid, however. All thought forms are docile by nature, and while they may look or behave in a frightening manner, and though they are capable of making physical contact, they pose no threat to humans. Once your session in the thought form manifester is completed, your thought form will be securely transported directly into a containment chamber. Thought forms are unable to pass through the barrier of manifestors and will not be capable of causing you any issues.
Finally, it ends on potential side effects, which are allegedly mild. Then we reach the end of the tape. There is a second part to this tape, but so far we have not seen it. What should we make of all this? Well, we were introduced to Semiodyne USA all the way back in the first tape, and this time we seem to be seeing them in their prime, conducting research on psychic beings known as thought forms. Thought forms are kinda like ghosts and can take basically any form. They can be created intentionally, unintentionally, or by force using the thought form manifester. We also have two names to keep track of: Alexander Michael Marsh and Dr. Bernard Hayes. Finally, it's worth mentioning that this tape must be given to the individual Alexander in 1993 at the earliest, which is gonna end up actually being pretty far on the timeline as far as events in this series go. Now we can ramp things up with tape 4, Unexpected Visitors. This tape is arguably one of the most confusing ones, mainly because I don't understand why the first half is being recorded, and arguably the second half as well. However, it seems to be someone outside of another person's house, watching them turn the lights off to go to sleep. Once the coast is clear, the person recording removes the screen from the window and initiates a home invasion. They proceed upstairs, and then the camera goes black. Then we cut forward by an unknown amount of time to see them nonchalantly walking back to the forest and away from the house as if nothing happened. They then zoom in on the moon for a little too long, a strange detail to include. Then the footage cuts to a TV commercial for Max Headroom on ABC.
My writers, my director, my friends, and you, the ordinary people who made me what I am today.
Max Headroom premieres after moonlighting tomorrow.
Based on the date, I found out that it was the premiere of an episode named Dream Thieves, with the synopsis: Dream thieves steal the innermost workings of the human mind, record them, and exploit them on television. It may be a coincidence, but I find it pretty unlikely. It's probably a thematic reference to the Thoughtform Manifester, at the very least. It's also worth noting that this episode went live on October 9th, 1987, which leads me to believe that the events of this episode in particular are taking place on October 8th, but I do have a reason to discount that way later if you stick around for the analysis. Unfortunately, the commercial is interrupted by an emergency warning.
At 3:34 a.m., Massachusetts State Police confirmed the presence of a potential group of active and unidentified home invaders who have targeted 49 residences since approximately 11:15 p.m. last night. The attacks appear to be random, spanning across the towns of North Adams, Cheshire, Savoy, and Windsor. The suspects are considered armed and extremely dangerous. Do not leave your secure area unless necessary.
It cuts to someone recording, with the warning on the TV playing in the background.
Wait, before you hit that button, let me hit this one. Join and get a welcome bonus up to 150.
Towards the end, several things were flashing on screen, including some pretty nasty gore that I won't show you guys. However, this picture, which seems to be depicting a face of some sort, is what I want to highlight. You are gonna need to remember this face. Based on the information that we have so far, it would be easy to assume that the cause of these home invasions were escaped thought forms, but this is another instance in which I really can't say for certain what's going on, even with the knowledge from every other tape. I can deposit some theories later on, but for now I think it would be best for us to transition into our next tape. Not here, not now, not anymore. This tape takes place during an ultrasound appointment. We learned that the woman getting the ultrasound's husband couldn't make it because of work.
You too. No dad this time?
No, unfortunately, he couldn't get off work today. So I'm gonna have to call him on a payphone to let him know all the details as soon as we're done.
Both of them are very excited to be having a baby, and they've even been together since high school. But then something strange happens.
Okay, hopefully this isn't too cold.
No, it's okay.
There he is. He's definitely a growing boy, that's for sure. And you're both looking really good.
Oh, I love hearing that.
Let's get some measurements to see exactly how much he's grown.
What was that?
The doctor, who is equally confused, attempts to play it off by saying the baby should still be there and that she's gonna go grab a different machine.
You know what? Why don't we just see if we can borrow another machine, okay? There has to be something wrong with this one. I'll be right back.
Okay.
When she leaves, she seems to start discussing what's going on with another doctor outside who may have had the same thing happen to one of his patients.
What are you talking about?
No.
This can't be happening. Your baby doesn't know your daughter? That makes no sense.
Is it happening? What happened?
Right now.
For the first time in the series so far, the description actually has something to say. It reads, "Do you know what they did up there? These are the consequences." There's also two newspaper articles, one that shows up at the end and one that flashes only briefly in the middle. I'll start with the more obvious one. It reads, Tiffany Mary Elaine Crisaldi, elementary school teacher, 29, of Rosepine Drive, Adams, died unexpectedly Monday morning. She had suffered tremendously after the sudden loss of her unborn son, Maxwell Marsh, on March 31st. She was unable to live with the heartache any longer. Born in Windsor, Massachusetts on May 20th, 1958, she was the only child of Harrison and Kathleen Crisaldi. She attended school in Adams, Massachusetts, and graduated in 1976 from Grand Hill Regional High School, among the top of her class. She went on to graduate from North Adams State College with a degree in early childhood education. During her freshman year of high school, she began dating Alexander Marsh, the man who would become her... If you were paying attention, you should remember the name Alexander Marsh as the patient from tape 3. Now we've established a connection between at least two of the tapes. Another important thing to note is that since she died at 29 and was born in 1958, we can extrapolate that these events took place in 1987, which is a year we've seen before. There's also another article that flashes briefly when the ultrasound gets disturbed, and that one reads, "Bizarre events leave Berkshire in terror. Authorities mute. Adams. Days after the unexpected events that left an unknown number of people dead and terrified. Authorities offering any kind of explanation." Despite the fact that the Massachusetts government engaged the emergency broadcast system, neither they nor any police department While it's been impossible to ascertain exactly what occurred, a number of arrests have been made, with some witnesses claiming that the attacks were by people they never thought would be capable of such atrocities. "I was in complete shock," said Theodore K., who happened to witness one of the suspects being, and from there, it cuts off. So this is clearly referring to the events from the previous tape, the home invasions. However, I think the most crucial takeaway here is when it says some witnesses claiming that the attacks were by people they never thought would be capable of such atrocities. In my opinion, this is a big clue, but we don't have the context we need for it to matter quite yet. The last thing I want to point out before we move on is that this showed up alongside of the quick newspaper flash during the disturbance. Again, it's the same face from before. Alright, with all that in mind, let's go on to tape 6, Sleeping Dogs. This tape opens with a seminar from the North American Council on Thought, and it occurred on October 4th, 1981. The speaker is none other than Dr. Bernard Hayes. Specifically, the speech is about Jungian psychology and the manifestation of consciousness, which makes sense considering the research we know he assists with later on. Jungian psychology originates from the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, who believed that a crucial step to understanding psychology lay in paying close attention to the subconscious. How fitting. I'll elaborate on his thoughts on psychology later on because it's actually going to be ridiculously important. In terms of the actual content of what he's saying, well, I'll let you listen for yourself.
Humanity has fought tirelessly passed through a great many trials of intellectual fortitude to achieve but one singular goal. A goal that countless men have withered away and dying in pursuit of, leaving their towers of work behind, to be climbed by coming generations. Higher and higher they ascend, so that we will at last reach the one called God. And there, on his apex of infinite knowledge and power, we will approach and look him in the eye as an equal.
From there, we're greeted by a semiodyne computer system very similar to that from the first tape. This time, we know for sure that this is taking place in 1987 once again. So, just like in tape 1, the required credentials are bypassed by someone with administrative privileges, and they're greeted by an unknown user ID.
By System Administrator. Greetings, unknown user ID. Welcome to Semiodyne USA's Virtual Message Assistant, for user. Project Director, Frank Porter.
Whoever is accessing these files, it's certainly not the project director. So what does this project director have to hide here? Well, he seems to have received several messages over the course of about a week from Paul Morelli of the Morelli Mining Company. The project Frank is responsible for seems to be the construction of a redacted facility, but I have a feeling that we already know what it is and what it's for. Let's hear what Paul has to say.
Hey Frank, it's Paul Morelli. We ran into somewhat of an issue today. We came across these tunnels inside the mountain, pretty deep in, but well, this is gonna sound a little crazy, but he told me to call if anything strange came up, and I figured this qualifies. People have been here before. Some obviously man-made shit in there, like carvings and stone. This shit looks ancient, like real old. I took a crew in to look through it, but since part of the tunnels caved in some time ago, we're gonna just have to bust through it regardless. But I still wanted to make you aware of it. Anyways, I'll keep you in the loop. Thanks.
Even from just this first message, we get a lot. Apparently, Paul was told to call Frank specifically if anything weird came up, as if he knew something weird would come up. On top of that, finding ancient relics of past civilizations during some random routine excavation feels like a pretty big deal. Paul's next message is from early the next morning. saying that some of his workers have suddenly come down with a sickness and that things might be a bit slower than usual. Not too out of the ordinary, right? Well, what is out of the ordinary is that the tunnel cave-in he and his crew discovered the day before has been cleared and rigged with lights without his or his night crew's knowledge. He assumes that Frank had something to do with it, but it still doesn't really make sense. To make matters worse, the crew claimed that they saw something in the woods at night. Something like a tall man. Paul assumes it's a random environmentalist who's protesting the fact that they're doing work on this mountain and ends his message to Frank with that before hanging up.
I'm trying to cause some shit, but he ain't done nothing, so I told him to keep focused on the project. For safety's sake, we're going to avoid the tunnel until I get back from you. All right, bye now.
Message 3. March 25th, 4:56 p.m.
The next message is from the evening later that same day. Another person gets sick, this time from Frank's end. One of the members of Paul's team, who used to be an archaeologist, Arnold Rivers, is named and referred to Frank for any additional information on the ancient artifacts that they found in the tunnels. The next day, Paul gets increasingly concerned.
Frank, something ain't right here. Crew's getting worse, more sick. I feel okay so far, but I don't know how long that's gonna last. I saw that thing the guys have been talking about last night, stalking around in the tree line. I swear it had a face. Anyways, just call me back as soon as you can, Frank.
The day after that, all of their food has gone rotten for seemingly no reason. The weather was fine and they were doing everything properly. Then, that afternoon, they see whatever entity has been stalking them once again and decide to put up hunting cameras.
Something out here with us. It's in the woods. And it's watching us, goddammit. It ain't no animal either. Who are you guys gonna put up those fancy hunting cameras and see if we can catch anything?
Dive into the 888 experience because it's made to play safely. Check out our Control Center hub where you can personalize the way you play. Set deposit limits.
Maybe locals fucking with us? I don't know. We'll figure it out. But yeah, anyways, I just...
Message 7 doesn't seem to have gone through properly, but the system glitching does allow us to briefly catch a glimpse of what this project was for, and just as we thought, it's the construction of the Unit 13 facility. That night, motion is detected in the forest again. This time it's some sort of smoke or aura. It kind of seems like a thought form. The next night, Paul calls again, increasingly frantic.
Frank, it's Paul. Holy shit, well, a lot of the crew here is sick now, and they're sort of unresponsive. We tried emergency contacts for them, but they just keep ringing. The phones, they just kept ringing and ringing and ringing. Just tried 911, still nothing. I figured the phones were fucked up, but the machine actually picked up. I think I caught whatever's going around. My skin, it feels tight. A lot of pressure behind my eyes. My teeth feel like they're humming, vibrating. You know what? This all started when we came across that tunnel. I feel like I need to figure out what's down there. I think whatever's down there could help my crew. But most of all, I feel like something really bad's gonna happen if I don't go down. So I'm going down tonight.
Then, motion detected. Once again, around 12 in the morning, and this time, it seems more like a ghost caught on camera. Could this maybe be a thought form? Let's hear Paul's final message.
Access denied. Of your messages.
Even after this message, there's still one more motion detection on the hunting cameras. There's that entity again. The description this time reads, "There came a red flash as it pitched from heaven, corruption wrought truth, 0707. Even though I personally think this tape is one of the more confusing ones, I will try to give some brief thoughts on it. I feel like Frank knew the miners would be finding something under that mountain. I mean, how could he not? Seeing as he asked Paul to call him specifically and may have even sabotaged all of their phone lines intentionally, leaving only his open. It also seems as if the crew were physically unable to leave the site, being stalked by the monster or entity and having all of their food rot for no reason. It really seems as if they were sent in there to die. The title, Sleeping Dogs, is likely a reference to the phrase, "let sleeping dogs lie," which basically means that you shouldn't interfere with an already bad situation because you might just make it worse. And I think this is trying to tell us that perhaps these tunnels are something that shouldn't have been meddled with, but regardless, we can only theorize. Let's move on to tapes 7 and 8. Tape 7 is really short, but still tells us quite a lot. It seems to be a segment on the local news channel, talking about the break-ins that happened in tape 4, with its host being Don Wright. This broadcast takes place 2 weeks after the incident. It seems normal at first, but there's a lot of glitching in the video feed and information that seems a little suspicious, knowing what we do. Apparently the story the public is being told is that it was an act of terrorism by an anti-American local militia group, and that several arrests were made and that local police should have gotten everything back to normal. Conveniently, the video distortion leaves out the name of the alleged militia group, probably because, in my opinion, it's irrelevant and untrustworthy information. I think the public is being blatantly lied to. Just as Don is giving his confident reassurances to the people, this happens.
Thankfully, due to the continued efforts of law enforcement, life has been able to return back to normal. Back to normal. Back to normal. To normal. To normal. To normal. Back to normal for residents of Berkshire County.
There is a briefly shown news article during that sequence. It says, "These events are only the tip of the iceberg," says Jim Melgreen, a former police officer who now works as a private investigator and hosts a radio show centered around government transparency and accountability. There are horrifying reports of people, healthy grown adults, becoming deformed, growing extra limbs, teeth growing out of their scalp, people developing severe mental conditions or even sicknesses doctors have never seen. And that's where that cuts off. If you were watching Greylock on its playlist, the ending of Tape 7 should perfectly segue into Tape 8.
Back to normal for residents of Berkshire County.
CDKeys.com. Shop the latest games and upcoming releases at the best prices.
It starts with a screen of the channel experiencing technical difficulties, which then transitions into a conversation between one of the channel executives and two of its producers. I think it would be best if I just played this part on its own.
Well, that broadcast went completely tits up, didn't it? I've been getting chewed out by our asshole CIA liaison for the past 2 hours. What the fuck happened?
Our engineers believe that the signal was hijacked before even reaching the transmitter, but once we started receiving phone calls from viewers, we switched to a backup transmitter.
But by then, the hijacker had already said everything they wanted to say, hadn't they?
Yes, sir.
Don, where the fuck is he? I cannot get hold of him, and he needs to get in here and read a statement to help clean up this fucking mess.
Well, we've been trying to reach him. We've called him multiple times. We've tried his pager. We've asked around to see if anyone's heard from him, but nothing.
You've been to his house?
Well, no. I just thought that maybe he'd be upset if I did that.
Get in your fucking car and go to his fucking house! I don't care if you kick down his front door and drag him here by his ear. You bring him into the studio. Do you understand?
Yes, Mr. Rosenbaum. Of course, I'll do that right now.
There's some real powerful people depending on us right now. They need us to manage the response to these events, to let the public know what's going on, and the last thing we need is it going wider than it already fucking has. So do what you need to do, or I'm gonna replace you with some producers who actually know how to produce a fucking show!
From here, we transition into what is once again someone trying to access files on a computer system, but something isn't right. Whoever is attempting to access this file has stumbled into something impossible.
Warning, anomalous file detected. This file should not exist. Are you sure you wish to proceed?
A file that does not exist. Regardless, we get to see the file, and it's a log left behind by the archaeologist from the Morelli mining team. If you remember the name, it's Arnold Rivers.
The date is April 8th, 1987, about 9:15 at night. I was involved in the Morelli construction project at Mount Greylock. I was hired due to my background in anthropology and archaeology. I've worked to excavate a number of different historical sites. Paul Morelli took me on after securing a government contract for the Greylock project. I'm recording this because I believe my life is in danger, and I likely don't have a lot of time left, so I need to leave some kind of record of my findings.
He talks about how he was hired for his experience in archaeology and anthropology, and how on March 25th, Paul cleared the tunnels and asked Arnold to venture in with him and his crew. This makes no sense, because the Paul we know had to ask Frank, who cleared the tunnels. Something isn't right here. Then he drops perhaps the most shocking revelations in the entirety of Greylock thus far.
But what we discovered in that mountain was not normal. Not only did I see the impact it was having on the crew, but certain aspects of my findings did not make any sense. Many of the artifacts were pre-colonial. Some were from Native American tribes, but there were other artifacts, some Mesoamerican, and others were shockingly Clovis in nature. Finding Clovis artifacts here means that people have been coming to Mount Greylock since at least 11,000 BCE. But that's not all, no. There are artifacts I found that could potentially be from even earlier, Paleo-American cultures that we have yet to even begin studying.
The artifacts under the mountain predated the American colonists, predated the Native Americans, and even predated other societies known to have existed thousands of years ago. But it gets even more ridiculous. Cultures that were never explicitly known to have crossed the Atlantic before Columbus, such as ancient Chinese, Indians, Romans, basically everywhere around the world, have been to this very mountain before. Originally, Arnold was excited because he's an archaeologist and an anthropologist. This is a ridiculous discovery. But what he discovered as he ventured further into the mountain haunted him for the rest of his life.
How could such a place be so important to so many cultures for so long? There must be something immense here. The tunnels all connected to a series of chambers deep into the interior of the mountain. That's where a majority of the relics were found. There were old baskets of herbs and spices, pottery, weapons and armor, talismans, and other religious items, countless other things. But all of it was there purposely, as offerings.
These cultures were not gathering here for no reason. No, they were here to worship something. Suddenly, we cut to a TV program from the same channel as before, and we learn that the show that we saw getting hijacked is called Don Right Tonight, presumably featuring Don as the host. The next section will make more sense once again if I just play it for what it is.
It was billions of years ago, when our planet was still mostly fire and rock, that a Mars-sized planet that had been drifting through our solar system collided directly with the Earth. The impact was so powerful and violent that the rogue planet was blown into countless pieces of debris. This debris collected to form our moon. Many of the pieces of the unknown planet remain inside the Earth to this day.
Then we transition into a 911 phone call from Liam, one of the show's producers.
Adams Police Department, Dispatcher Carey speaking.
Yes, I'm calling to report a break-in at my coworker's house.
What is your name, sir?
My name is Liam Hollander.
Okay, Liam, you said this was your coworker's house. What is your coworker's address?
It's Parker Hill Road in Adams, number 491.
491 Parker Hill Road, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell me, is anybody hurt? Liam, are you still with me?
Yes, sorry.
Is anybody hurt?
Yes.
Suddenly, we're taken back to Arnold's logs. He continues describing his findings, how he found evidence of massive amounts of animal and human sacrifice. Arnold, despite not getting sick the same as the other workers for whatever reason, has been noticeably impacted emotionally and mentally by the discoveries that he made. He even tried to reason with Frank, the project director, who disregarded his concerns entirely. When Arnold said he would not be coming back to the project, Frank insisted that he does, offering a raise and even trying to convince him by saying he'd be responsible for the biggest historical finding of all time. Arnold, who valued his continued livelihood and sanity above fame and fortune, refused a second time, especially because he knew what happened to the other sick workers. And now it's time for us to find out what happened too.
Morale Greylock event, Group C, Survivor data.
Some were luckier than others. Most of them were changed physically, though a few were still recognizable at least. Almost all of them were negatively affected mentally though, from violent tendencies to paranoia to manipulation to straight-up cannibalism. Arguably the worst of them, previously Scott Oakhurst, attacked and consumed 6 staff members on April 6th of 1987, all the while laughing maniacally. For those who met fates such as that, the physical changes were so massive that they started straying from what you could even define as human. Quarantine or straight-up euthanasia was a common suggestion for many of them. For some odd reason, Frank was eerily quick to accept Arnold's second refusal. He wished him best of luck on future endeavors and then hung up. Obviously, this instilled a massive sense of paranoia in Arnold, since it seemed pretty unlikely he'd be allowed to live with the knowledge of everything that happened during the project. He describes some other stuff that's been going on too.
These things that have been happening around the mountain, the home invasions, the dead bodies that fell from the sky over Cheshire, the pregnancy phenomena, so many other unexplainable things. They all must be related, and I've been trying to figure out how.
He's attempted to connect with a certain local investigator about what's going on, and that might be our Jim Melgreen from before. But Arnold also noted that his front door had been left unlocked when he came back from getting groceries the other day, instilling even more paranoia and fear into him. After checking all of the light bulbs in his house with ridiculous scrutiny after the fact, he couldn't find anything. No microphone or camera that's hidden somewhere, nothing. At this point, Arnold was able to point out his slipping sanity in the third person, but he's glad that he was at least able to record everything. Thank God for that.
I'm glad that I put all of this into a recording. Perhaps that was what I needed to snap me out of this. Honestly, I feel much better just talking about it. This can't be. Oh my God, that's my basement door. No. Camcorder. Oh, where's the damn camcorder? Here it is. Thank God.
They're here. I'm inside my bedroom closet. I'm going to keep the tape
tape recorder running, and I'm hiding in here with my files. If something happens to me, and you find any tapes or files somehow, please bring it to the investigator, Jim Malcolm of North Adams. That goes for this video footage as well.
Come on out, it's the police.
Here's that damn entity, this weird masked entity again. This tape was the longest by far, and it gave us a hell of a lot of info. I think that this masked entity has to be intelligent. It seems to act with defined purpose, and it specifically benefits Semiodyne in covering up these government conspiracies and happenings occurring all over the area of Mount Greylock. Clearly, there is a lot more to this that we're not seeing. I can't even give a clear reason as to why Don was killed, and by who, though it seems to be from a group that knows that the public is being manipulated and doesn't take too kindly to that fact. The biggest revelation that was made was definitely the clarification on the tunnels within the mountain and what they were used for. I think I have a rough idea as to what it might be trying to tell us, but that I'll have to save for later. For now, let's go ahead and move on to tape 9, Trojan Technology. This tape begins with a file being recalled on the same computer system we've heard multiple times at this point. It then shows us what I think is a vintage radio broadcast advertising the National Access Initiative. I think it's no coincidence that the logo of this radio station looks similar to that from the TV station that we recently saw. This National Access Initiative seemed to have been set into place during the presidency of Lyndon B. Johnson, which was during the 1960s. The goal of the initiative was to place critical electronics such as radio, television, and phones into every American household, regardless of whether you were wealthy or not. The idea is great, in theory. Let's give everyone a means to communicate, even if they don't have the money to buy the electronics. In the real world, President Johnson was famous for attempts to expand public broadcasting, his focus on civil rights, and overall trying to make life easier for those who lived in poverty. So this whole thing is pretty appropriate. Unfortunately for those in the Greylock universe, the electronics packages were being provided by Semiodyne. The tape goes out of its way to describe them as being world-renowned technology manufacturers. The video then briefly cuts to a newspaper showing that President Kennedy actually denied Semiodyne's original push for the initiative, before then switching to a newspaper detailing his eventual assassination and the swearing in of President Johnson. Then, we see what looks like security footage of the inside of someone's home in July of 1966. In fact, we get to see quite a few of these, actually, including someone sleeping in their own bed being watched. Something interesting to note is that these all have different time zones, meaning these are completely different parts of America, which is implying that the reach of this thing is insane. They're spying on people in the entire country. After this, we get an interview from then President of Semiodyne USA, Percival C. Rothwell. The things that he says are pretty convincing. Basically, his speech summarized is him describing how people who can't afford modern electronics are inadequately prepared to respond to emergency situations relative to many others, and that the goal of the initiative spearheaded by Semiodyne is to rectify that disparity. However, partway through his speech, it switches to him talking about something else.
What it is we're working on at any given time inside Semiodyne. And for decades, we've kept it all quite secretive. But I'll let you in on a little something. Oh, yeah. Kennedy didn't go for it. But you assured me he was amenable. Was that just more of your bullshit? No? He's gonna fucking expose our whole plan for the NII program. The meeting couldn't have gone worse. If that fucking Nick thinks he's gonna expose Simeodine, he's got another thing coming. But we're not the only ones he's pissed off lately. After rejecting Operation Northwoods, and then that executive order involving the Federal Reserve, there are a lot of snakes in the grass. And it's about time that Kennedy got bit.
So, we don't know who he's talking to, but this exposes a lot of what actually happened. Simeodine either directly or indirectly orchestrated Kennedy's assassination in this universe. The mention of Operation Northwoods, which was a real proposal to frame the Cuban government for acts against the US that would warrant starting a war, is actually pretty interesting. But the plan wasn't declassified until November of 1997. What does this mean? It means that Simeodine has had a deep-running connection to the American government for a lot longer than their projects in earlier tapes, like in the 80s and 90s. He describes how the only reason humanity got this far is because they stood strong together, which is more pretty solid reasoning and campaigning for the initiative. Meanwhile, more surveillance footage is intercut in the speech. At 6:10, a frame flashes that shows us a different image of the masked entity that we've never seen before. It has no cracks, and it's red. Not sure what to make of it, but it's pretty interesting. The next instance of surveillance footage has skipped forward by decades, October 1990. I think this tells us all we need to know about the NAI program. The next one skips to 1993. Then, the applause, followed by a picture of many cloaked entities wearing masks not dissimilar to the one we're already familiar with. From there, the radio broadcast continues to describe how it will be first made available to crucial infrastructure such as schools and police departments, and that it will take time to arrive in certain areas. Before it has time to elaborate on this any further, we cut to more surveillance footage. This one is dated December 29th, 1994, which I think ends up being the farthest date that we get to explicitly see. Shortly after we start viewing this surveillance footage, an unidentified creature rises from the shadows in the corner of the room.
Hello? Is somebody there? Where are my glasses?
Katie, I'm over here. Katie.
Oh, there you are. Who are you?
I'm your imaginary friend.
Imaginary friend? But I didn't imagine you.
You must have, because here I am. You probably just don't remember.
Are you from your doctor's office place that I had to go to?
I think you might be right.
I can't find my glasses, so I can't really see you.
Oh, they're over here. I noticed they were a little dirty, so I wanted to clean them for you.
Really?
Yes, they look all shiny and new now. Here. Come get them. Then you'll be able to see me.
Where are they? I still can't really see because my eyes are so bad.
You reach out and I'll
Based on the information that we just learned, I think it might be safe to say that this quote-unquote imaginary friend was actually a thought form that followed the young girl Katie home. It cuts back to the ending of the radio broadcast describing a nationwide release of mid-1966 to early 1967, which lines up with the first surveillance footage that we got to see at the beginning. Finally, to end off this tape, one last bit of surveillance footage.
Hello, you've reached Alex Marsh and Tiffany Crisaldi. We're not able to get to the phone, so please leave a message after the tone and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
This video taught us a lot about the nature of Semiodyne as an organization. It seems like they can't possibly be up to any good, and may be responsible, at least partially, for a lot of the events that we've seen transpiring throughout the story. Based on this stuff at the end, we can also assume that the Crisaldis, which we've seen bits and pieces of info strewn throughout the tapes for thus far, will come back into play very soon. However, based on the information in the 10th and final tape as of making this video, their stories might be far more important to the overall narrative than we could have ever initially realized. Without further ado, let's go ahead and check out Tape 10, Messages from the Dead.
Finding a great new online casino can prove very frustrating, but luckily for you, we've done the painful research so you don't have to. We've visited hundreds of online casinos to bring you our top 10.
Tape 10 begins with footage of an individual recording themselves walking through the forest. Eventually, they seem to come across and examine the lifeless body of a rat, and I do want to point out that the gloves that they're wearing are pretty similar to the ones that I think we saw in the window in Unexpected Visitors, but I'm not sure if this is just a coincidence or if it actually means anything. Why this individual decided to pick up this rat in the forest is something we'll find out later, but for now, the footage cuts back to the same visual of the clock and answering machine that we saw at the end of the previous tape. Let's have a listen to what it has to say.
Hey, babe. I'm just checking in. Could you please give me a call as soon as you can? Don't worry about work either, please. You're way more important, okay? Okay. I love you. Bye.
After that first voicemail, it cuts to Alex sitting at a table across from a man listening to his account of what happened the day Tiffany was found dead. He describes how, after they lost the baby, he stayed home from work for about a month to comfort his wife, but eventually had to return to work. They made an agreement that every day during his lunch break he would call home to check on her, and she picked up every single time. But on that day, she didn't.
Tiffany, babe, still haven't heard from you. Hope everything's okay. You're probably just busy doing something, but we've been talking every day since I've been back to work, so, you know, just, I'm getting a bit worried, so please call me back, okay?
We then briefly get to see what looks like some sort of ritual. At this point, Alex's concern has been elevated enough for him to go home early and check on his wife, Tiffany. Then we hard cut to a screen showing a login prompt. The background reads, Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Massachusetts. Then we get the report.
Dr. Heinrich Albrecht, Medical Examiner, Westfield. May 19th, 1987, 3:23 p.m. Intake report for Tiffany Elaine Marie Crisaldi.
For some reason, whilst her description is being read out, the playback has a difficult time settling on her age for an unknown reason. This is interesting because it seems to settle on 28 when the article from way back said 29. For whatever reason, Tiffany's age has discrepancies. Immediately after, we see a terrifying visual glitch, which also shows a scripture in the caption box.
Adams Police Department.
The scripture, Revelations 9:6, reads as follows, And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. I'll talk about what that might mean a little later. After that, we get to see what Tiffany's body actually looks like, and it's really unusual. A black substance leaks out from her eyes and mouth. The main issue that caused the need for this specialized autopsy was the markings made on her stomach. According to the doctor, due to a lack of hemorrhaging around the wound, these markings must have been made after death, which is very concerning because it makes a suicide look like a homicide, which is probably why Alex seems to be taken in for questioning. Before we get time to process all of that information, we cut to a therapy session with a younger Tiffany.
So, Tiffany, you just had your 6th birthday, didn't you?
Yeah.
Did you have a party?
Yeah.
How was it?
Good.
That's good. You're awfully quiet today. Are you seeing them again?
Yes.
You see them right now?
Yes.
Where are they? Where are they, Tiffany?
They're everywhere.
It seems that this section is recounting a therapy session that Tiffany had when she was much, much younger, at just 6 years old. Though there seems to be that strange discrepancy with her age, she was allegedly born in 1958, which would place this session at 1964, the earliest dated event in the series. Back then, she was seeing things that aren't normal. Perhaps Tiffany was able to see thought forms. After that, we cut to the personal log of the doctor that we had just met. Tiffany's body had apparently arrived just before he was meant to leave the office for the day, but he decided to at least do the external analysis regardless. During this, the room had strange electrical flickers and spikes in temperature, which to me certainly suggests some kind of thought form activity. Something else strange also happened while he was working with the body.
I wanted to refrain from mentioning this part whatsoever, but after placing Miss Crisaldi in storage and moving on to cleaning up, my assistant Sarah mentioned that she'd heard what sounded like a woman crying, coming from the direction of the cooler. I shrugged off her remark and let her leave early, telling her she was likely stressed or overtired, and I continued cleaning up on my own. I didn't dare to tell her that I heard it as well.
Want to play Incredible? Then let this play. Play over 1,000 games, including a
Then we cut back to Tiffany's therapy session once again. In this part, the doctor seems to be using a type of hypnosis-based therapy in order to help Tiffany work through her problems, asking her to describe her house and front yard in great detail. He slowly instructs her to advance further towards and then into the house, and then upstairs towards her bedroom. It's actually a pretty soothing and calming experience to listen to.
And you start walking nice and calmly towards it. You see the door coming closer with each step. You can see the pink flower stickers that you put on it 2 years ago, and the small wooden sign that reads Tiffany, with the little blue bird in the corner. Step, step, step.
You almost forget that you're watching an analog horror series, but the dread of knowing that something must go wrong at some point lingers in the back of your mind as Tiffany advances through the house. It's brilliantly made suspense. I believe this may be the doctor's attempt to pry into Tiffany's unconscious mind to learn more about why she's having the issues that she has. If you remember when I mentioned Jungian psychology previously in the video, this type of therapy isn't too detached from his ideas. The doctor makes specific attempts to describe how everything is exactly the way that it should be, with the only difference being that Tiffany is alone in the house rather than surrounded by family as she probably is normally.
You feel comfortable. You feel safe. You are alone.
It isn't until she gets into her upstairs bedroom and finishes scanning her surroundings that she notices the first inconsistency in this entire mental exercise.
You walk into a room, and that's when you can see something different that's never been there before. Tell me what you see.
It's a door next to my window.
That's right, it's a door. Walk to the door and open it.
I'm scared.
It doesn't matter if you're scared. You must open the door.
Once this strange door in her mind has been opened, the video feed glitches and the music fades, and the uneasy tension that's been lingering the entire time starts to truly set in.
Small room. Somebody's in there.
No, Tiffany, you're alone.
No. There's someone here. He's facing away from me. He's standing and tall. He's very tall.
Tiffany, you are alone.
There's a TV. The screen is all fuzzy, and the tall man is watching it.
Tiffany, I want you to focus on removing the man from your mind. When I snap my fingers, he will be gone. You will be alone.
The man's shaking. His body is cracking.
Okay, Tiffany, I'm going to count down from 5. When I snap my fingers, you will return to the real world. 5. You're feeling more awake
He's
now.
turning around.
4. Everything around you is becoming hazy.
He's looking at me. He sees me.
3, Tiffany, you can feel the chair you're sitting in again. 2, everything around you fades to the blackness behind you. 1, full control of your body. 0, you're awake, Tiffany. You will return to reality now.
We see a desk. If you remember from the beginning of the tape, there was a person searching the forest who found a rat corpse, or maybe it's a prop, who knows. For whatever reason, upon using scissors to cut into the rat, a tape is retrieved. I'm not sure if this rat is meant to be a prop in universe, or why a tape is inside of the rat, or how this person knew to randomly go to the forest to find it where it was. Regardless of any of those questions, the cassette is shoved into a player, and we hear a message to end our final tape.
Mr. Reverend, I have some very important information for you pertaining to the events you have been investigating. You must have questions regarding who I am, how I located you, and what reason I have contacted you. I won't be answering any of those questions, but I will be clear in due time. For now, I am simply offering you information. You can take it or leave it. It's impressive you remained alive for this long. But then again, you've gone to great lengths in the past in order to survive, haven't you? I'm going to tell you a story, Jim. A story that you've been dying to hear.
Finally, the description reads, "The serpent's right eye was plucked from his head and was transformed, and engulfed in a great flame that was fashioned to provide light for all of creation. And lo, it was made to nourish the earth, so that life might thrive and flourish from it." And that is where Greylock, as of now, ends. Or at least that would have been the case if tape 11 didn't just come out. This part is going to be unscripted because this is a very last minute change to the video, but tape 11 came out while I was asleep the day before the video was supposed to go live. So I'm going to briefly talk about it. It doesn't seem to have anything ridiculously important as far as I know. It looks like it might have a connection to that little ritual section from tape 10. And it also is on the channel that tapes 7 and 8 and etc. highlight, and tape 9 with the radio. So just wanted to briefly talk about that. I'm not going to dedicate a huge portion to it, and from here we're going to go on to the analysis, and the analysis will not be considering that video because this video was supposed to be done. So sorry about that, but yeah.
Welcome back to the Coral Fan Derby. They're all here in top form. It's the lads with no tops. Next, it's...
Alright, well, now we're at the part where I have to try to figure out what's going on. If you've been on the channel for long enough, you've probably realized by now that the format I prefer to use is to set up a timeline of events with theories and possible explanations along the way. But, if you can't tell, this series is probably the most dense in terms of the sheer amount of information that I've ever covered. But despite all that, I'm going to try my best either way. I think that the very first event in Greylock is actually from a rather dismissible, easy-to-miss detail from tape 8. There's a short segment that describes how the moon was formed when a Mars-sized planet collided with Earth, and how pieces of the ancient planet are still stuck inside of Earth's crust to this day. I've heard a few theories regarding the significance of this, but I don't really like any of them, but unfortunately, I don't really have any of my own either. It's not the only time the moon seems to be a weird point of focus either, with a pretty long portion in tape 4 being dedicated to it, as well as the cameras in tape 6 usually being activated at 12 AM near the moon's peak in the sky. Overall, I think we don't have enough information to make anything out of this weird moon thing, but it felt worth pointing out, just in case any of you guys have good ideas. After that, we know that at some point in the distant past, Mount Greylock has been compelling people from various times and places all across the world towards it. At some point, the tunnels and areas of worship and sacrifice were made and used underneath the mountain. I believe the deity that they were worshipping under the mountain is this masked entity that we've seen time and time again, and I also believe he is very likely to be the main antagonistic force of the series. It's hard to back this up with any evidence aside from his frequent appearances, because there are so many different threats in the series, it's impossible to know what's really going on. If we skip forward to about the late 1800s, Percival's great-great-grandfather founded the technology company Semiodyne. I believe that, on the surface, this is all Semiodyne is to the public, just a technology manufacturing and distributing company. However, based on the absurd amount of global influence that the organization seems to have, along with their involvement in many government conspiracies and their knowledge of Mount Greylock, it leads me to believe Semiodyne has much more under the surface than we've even begun to realize with our entire knowledge from tapes 1 through 10. In the 1960s, Semiodyne is responsible, at least partly, for the Kennedy assassination and the employment of the NAI program, which is secretly a method of spying on the American populace. Tape 9 has many interesting details, such as the red mask seemingly overlaid over the CEO's face, and the group of cloaked, mask-wearing people. My personal theory is that Semiodyne is a modern collection of descendants of people who used to worship in the tunnels under the mountain. This would explain why Semiodyne even knows about it in the first place. A much younger Tiffany has been going to hypnosis-based therapy sessions, and based on what we see in the tape, she seems to have an innate ability to see things that aren't described to us in detail. We can assume that these are thought forms, but what was up with the tall man that had his body cracking in her mind? Well, it's not the first time that the masked entity has been described as a tall man, and with that description of his body cracking, it feels like, for whatever reason, Tiffany has some acute affiliation with thought forms and with the masked entity. She's become a lot more important than just a mother who mysteriously lost her baby at this point. One thing I thought was interesting about this session is that the doctor seemed pretty familiar with her, and also almost seemed to expect what happened during their session. At the very least, he expected the door by the window. I think this doctor might be more important than we might know, but only time will tell. From this point, we get a pretty large gap in things that we actually get to see happen. The closest thing from here is all the way in 1981 with Dr. Hayes' symposium on Jungian psychology. The fact that Jungian psychology is specifically highlighted here is more important than you realize, as I believe it to have incredible thematic significance. Let me explain. In Jungian psychology, a person can be thought of as an iceberg. The tip is what that person shows to everyone else, and everything under the water is what Jung coined a person's shadow. This shadow is a representation of the unconscious mind and is composed of repressed ideas, weaknesses, desires, instincts, and shortcomings. It's the part of you that you don't like. It's free from any adjustments you make to the face that you show the outside world. I think this idea is directly related to the thought form manifester, as well as the idea of Semiodyne being a sort of secret secondary government literally hiding in the shadows. The reason why thought forms that are created through normal means, via intense self-reflection over a long period of time, are not aggressive and generally act as familiars is because it's people coming to terms with their shadow. It's literally another version of themselves. Carl Jung himself once said the shadow is a living part of the personality and therefore wants to live with it in some form. It cannot be argued out of existence or rationalized into harmlessness. Essentially, those who create thought form familiars correctly will quite literally be living alongside their shadow. With the thought form manifester, though, the thought form is created through a person's shadow without any sort of reflection or real effort. The creation of aggressive thought forms that look straight out of nightmares is the result of this process. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We don't even learn about thought forms until January 1993. What else happens before then? I believe what's next are the events of Tape 6, Sleeping Dogs, which takes place in late March of 1987. I believe that Semiodyne very clearly knew what they were doing by hiring the miners to unearth the tunnel, and I find it very strange that Paul told the project director that he didn't know who cleared the tunnel, whereas later, Arnold would go on record saying that Paul was the one who cleared the tunnel. In my opinion, this is just a matter of Arnold assuming that it was Paul because he had no reason to question who had actually done it. He probably just wasn't present. Most of the events we see in the series happen in 1987, and Sleeping Dogs takes place earliest in 1987 as we get to see, which leads me to believe that the opening of the tunnels under Mount Greylock are the catalyst for all of the terrible events that would soon follow, including what happens to the miners, to Arnold, to Tiffany and Alex's baby, the home invasions, and the News Network incident. At some point in around these years, Semiodyne decided they wanted to construct Unit 13 for their thought form experiments. Considering Project Stargate in the real world began in 1978, I'd assume it may have been somewhere around that time. This is when they get a contract deal with Paul Morelli and the Morelli Mining Company to begin excavating Mount Greylock, most certainly with Semiodyne having full knowledge of the tunnels that lie beneath. It is undoubtedly so, in my opinion, that Semiodyne purposefully subjected the miners to the sickness that resulted from the opening of the tunnels, because they were unable to contact anyone except for the project director. I believe that by opening the tunnels, they also released the masked entity. He then stalks the miners in the tree line, preventing them from leaving until they've all succumbed to illness, to which it shows up in the hunting camera at the end of the video. Now, we've gotten to the point in which I need to talk about the break-ins, the home invasions. I believe I actually have a very solid theory as to what goes on in this portion, but for it to work, I actually need to discount something I said earlier. When I pointed out the max headroom segment in Tape 4, I noted that I believed the break-ins took place in October because of when the episode aired, but this is actually impossible. It can't have been the case, since Arnold describes them in his logs from April 8th, and he dies on that day. This leaves two options. One, I looked too far into it and the break-ins happened before April 8th, or two, there was more than one set of break-ins, and the one we saw in the second half of Tape 4 was completely separate. With that out of the way, let me describe my theory. I believe that following the sickness that was brought upon the miners, they would escape the construction site and make their way down the mountain, causing the break-ins that we see in Tape 4. I have many reasons to believe this to be the case. For one, it's not unlikely the miners could have made their way down the mountain after the events of Tape 6. The town of Adams and North Adams are actually pretty close to the mountain. Since the timeline of events between Paul's death and the rest of the surviving crew having their pictures taken and displayed in tape 8 is only a matter of a few days, I believe this could be further evidence for the miners being responsible for the break-ins. The thick black leather glove that reaches its hand through the window in tape 4 also feels like the kind of thing I'd expect a mine worker to be wearing. And the most crucial bit of evidence, in my opinion, is when the newspaper said people that were doing these break-ins were people that they would have never expected to commit such atrocities. Overall, the timeline is too short for it to have not been them, in my opinion. At least, that's how I feel with our current information. From there, citing the newspaper, multiple arrests were made, and the sick miners were all contained at a location named Site B651. The symptoms of the miners were archived between April 2nd and 3rd, with the cannibalism incident happening on the 6th and Arnold's death being 2 days later on the 8th. Quite a few things have to have happened between Paul's first message and Arnold's death. Moving on to Tiffany, we have an exact